Welcome to Romance Unzipped, your happily ever after book club. I'm Holly.
And I'm Annie. We read, write, and obsess about all things romance.
Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Romance Unzipped podcast. I'm Annie.
I'm Holly. Hello.
We are book clubbing the world's greatest genre. And today we are talking about Deep End by Ali Hazelwood.
This is the first Ali Hazelwood book I've read in a few years, and I have to say it was great. I
Girl
enjoyed it so
is
much.
rocking those writing skills. She's been a great writer always, but this is like, she is ramping up.
This is a first person, present tense, single point of view. We follow Scarlett through the whole book. She's a junior at Stanford University, an elite diver, and also in keeping with Ali Hazelwood's usual themes, she's in academia. She's a biology wizard.
Computational biology.
Yes, she's very smart. And her love interest in this book is Lukas. He is a
Lukas with
swimmer.
a K, Lukas.
Yes, he's Swedish. He's the world's fastest swimmer, an Olympian.
The actual best swimmer in the world.
Yes, he's got it all going on.
Yeah, and he's beautiful, surprisingly.
Keeps happening.
Yeah, it just keeps happening. So it is present day, and we were talking about this. It's not necessarily specific tropes. So it's just, as Holly said, like a student athlete, intellectual, perfectionist love story with some very sexy elements. What is the steam level?
It's got to be a 4 or 5. There are some very spicy scenes, and Ali's not holding back with the descriptions on this one.
No, it is explicit and plentiful. So if you are not interested in the sex, then this is not the book for you.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, their relationship is based upon BDSM, and he is kind of authoritarian with her, and she is very happy to let him control the action. Yeah. So we see that show up on the page a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, less like kind of punishment and pain, and more of this kind of like control and daddy's not the right word because it's not daddy, but it's like the caretaker and also the sex boss.
Yes, and that pervades their entire relationship. That's the role that they have with each other. He tells her, it's my job to break you into a million pieces and then put you back together again. And so he's very much into fixing her and helping her. And she is such a bottle of anxiety. She's so happy to have someone take the reins from her and tell her what to do and help her get her head on straight.
Okay, so let's dive into the characters. It's because it really is a character-driven book as opposed to being driven by the tropes, which I thought was a great call that Holly pointed out. I was like, oh, yeah.
So Scarlett is a diver. She's in her junior year, and up until this point in her life, she's been perfect at everything, the best diver, the best at school. And at the start of this book, she's a little over a year off from a horrible injury that she had in this big tournament at the end of her freshman year, where she had a bad dive. She hit the water the wrong way and got a concussion and broke her shoulder and did all this stuff. And she is physically healed by this point, but emotionally and mentally, she just can't get back on the horse. And so the construct of the book is her working. She's just started with a new therapist, and she's kind of working through these issues with a goal to dive better. And her whole focus is on being perfect again and getting back up to her peak athletic performance.
Yeah, and I didn't know anything about professional diving, and I just see the Olympic sport and that's it. And so it's really interesting. Ali Hazelwood obviously did a ton of research on it, or else has some association with it, because she was like intimately aware of the different types of dives and the training that goes into it, and it likened it to very different from swimming, but like a contact sport like football, because the divers are hitting the water from the tall platform at like 33 feet. So it's impact unless you enter perfectly, which was really interesting. She was just talking about how hard it is on bodies.
I would imagine anyone that has been a diver before would really like this book, because it did seem extraordinarily detailed. I have no reason to believe that any of it was not accurate. It was such a good choice for Scarlett because the diving sport, as it was described, matched her personality very well. It was almost like a metaphor for her, but yet it's what she was doing, where it required all this precision and grace, but also brute strength and force. And together that's kind of what her personality was. And she talks
Mhm.
about how she's always been a perfectionist and it's always worked out for her. She just
Yeah,
was the best at every single thing.
it worked till it didn't work.
It worked till it didn't work, as things usually go in life. So she's finally at this point where she feels like everything is falling apart. And
Can
as,
relate.
as thank you, Scarlett, for making us all feel better. As a reader, I could tell, or at least I got the impression that she was catastrophizing and that things weren't that bad, but she felt like she was failing in her classes because she was taking
She
the
was
more,
perfect.
yeah, she wasn't perfect. She was, I think she was getting a C in German, which was very upsetting for her. But even in her other classes, it wasn't the STEM focused classes that she piled at the front of her, like in her freshman and sophomore year. She was left with the other English.
Philosophy,
Yes.
language. They were just blowing her mind. She's like, there's not rigid
There aren't
rules.
rules. What am I supposed to do? And so she felt like that was falling apart, even though she seemed like she was still doing quite well in school. And then her diving wasn't working, and she just feels like she doesn't have any friends, and it's all falling down on her.
Yeah. Well, and her backstory is she had an abusive father, and he wasn't, it sounds like maybe not physically abusive, but emotionally abusive, controlling, verbally abusive, berating her. So her narrative of needing to be perfect makes total sense. And this idea of like, she isn't safe unless she has control. And
Mhm.
so when she doesn't have control of her body because it got injured, of her classes because they're not in her wheelhouse, this like lid that she kept on all of these things blows off and she's not okay. So it's like the secret fire under the lid, or however people say things like that. Yeah, it's like the broken leg that isn't healed. And she
Yes.
was just trying to walk it off, and it worked till it didn't work. And then enter Lukas. Oh,
Lukas is a total dreamboat.
Okay, everyone's always like, book boyfriend. I'm like, you can't have a book boyfriend every book. I mean, you can, but that's a lot of boyfriends.
That's a short-lived relationship.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and I feel like I could be loyal to Lukas in our book relationship. Like he was mythological in his greatness. He's
Yeah,
like,
he's world famous, this guy, for just being so good at swimming, and he's very
or
attractive, and he's got this, what did she call his body? Majestic but improbable. Like he's just got this
yes,
such
the
an
majestic,
amazing.
probable body of a D1 swimmer, which is like the Division 1 athlete swimmer. So he's just like Michael Phelps' body. This,
Right, he's the quintessential swimmer.
mhm. And of course, he has a tattoo because he's hot. He's got brown hair, blue eyes,
Freckles.
lighter skin, and freckles. And he's kind of stoic and reserved. And she hasn't really ever noticed him, which is so interesting because he is like the actual best swimmer in the world, and he's gorgeous. And she sees him all the time in his tech speedo. So it's like, how do you not look? But she's so self-consumed with her fear and her focus and her need to like control that all she sees are these little things she has in front of her. So until like their worlds crash, she has no clue, and he has been cluing on her, which is also fun.
Yes, we get these little hints throughout the book that he's noticed her, that they met each other when she came out for recruitment when she was still in high school to figure out what college she was going to go to. They've had a
She
couple
doesn't
classes.
remember.
Yeah, she doesn't remember meeting him. They've had a few classes together, which means you're in the classroom together for a quarter. I mean, that's not a short amount of time, and she is unaware. But then she's also aloof towards other people as well. And it comes up at various times, and it does kind of make sense within her personality. Like you said, she doesn't come across conceited or arrogant. It's not that
No,
kind of self-obsession, but she's just so focused on what's right in front of her that
that's
she's got
it.
blinders on to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's it. She's like, all I can do is be perfect, and everything else, there's nothing else. There's other things here.
Yeah, she said she had a 15-year plan when she graduated high school, and she's just like going down the list.
Yeah, wow, mine was like, I am gonna
I think I'm
party
gonna go
and
get a
probably
latte.
join a band, even though I have no talent. One thing that is really fun about this book is Ali Hazelwood's writing is so sharp, and her books have always been great to read, but her writing has just gotten so tight. And an example is how Lukas is introduced. So the scene, he enters the book, when it's her Scarlett's 21st birthday. And so she's out with her swim team and she still feels like an outsider, even though they're celebrating her birthday. And Penelope, who's like and Lukas's girlfriend, is kind of confesses to the table, but that she's not happy with her sex life with the world's most perfect man. And everyone's like, what? And the inside of Scarlett's head, she thinks, I can't say Lukas's last name, so I'm just going to say Lukas. And Penn and Lukas have been dating since forever. For all I know, they were betrothed at birth to cement U.S.-Sweden diplomatic relations. So it's like, she doesn't say, oh, he's Swedish. And like, she just did really subtle introductions. And then she said, I resurfaced my spotty memories of him. Black Speedos, tattoos, short, choppy brown hair, above average wingspan. Here's your line, Holly. The majestic and yet improbable build of every other D1 swimmer who ever lived. And Penn is saying, well, I don't like how he fucks. And Victoria, another girl's like, how do you not like it? He's him. And so Scarlett goes through this list in her head, and then she goes, yeah, Victoria's right. We can safely hazard that, yes, Lukas does fuck. You know, because she's like, how could he not?
This all computes. Let me just spit out the answer at the end.
Yes. And so, yeah, totally goes through her little algorithm. And that's kind of the first time she thinks of him, is in this context. And then the part of it is that he wants to have a specific type of sex where he's in control, and Penelope does not like to be.
She's not into the same kinks as he is. And so that's one reason their relationship is struggling. Although we find out throughout the book, they have a relationship based on childhood trauma history, friendship. They got together when they were 15 or 16. And it's not so much that they're in love with each other as they are best friends and they're each other's safety and comfort. So they break up very early in the book. And that's when Scarlett comes in. And in fact, before Scarlett even thinks of Lukas in that way, Penelope gets drunk at a party and says, oh, you two.
You should
hook up.
She's a sub. She's submissive because Scarlett's trying to help her. So she kind of opens up about having a relationship where she wanted what her boyfriend didn't want. And Penelope can't relate, but then she gets drunk and spills the beans. And so Lukas is like, has this.
Oh, really?
My little diamond does sparkle.
So I liked the slow build that the two of them had. I don't know if I'd even call it a slow burn because it didn't last that long, but the way they got to know each other and they opened up just a little bit, it was always had this underlying truth that they both knew about the other's sexual proclivities, and they both knew that they happened to be a match for each other, and that in their past relationships they hadn't found a match. So that knowledge was kind of simmering under the surface, but then at the same time they're just trying to get to know each other, because I think Scarlett says they've never spoken or only exchanged a handful of words in the years that she's been at Stanford and that he's been there. So it was a fun courtship, if you will.
Yeah. And he is invested. And there's a couple moments where she's like, you could have anybody you want. And I don't know if Penelope says it for him. I think maybe it's like Penelope who does the kind of arguing of why they should be together, but he is so famous and it is a very specific kink, and he can't just go on a dating app, like that is very gossip newsworthy. And so it's safer for him to have sex with Penelope's teammate, is Penelope's reasoning, which also is kind of a nice part of one of the big themes of the book is friendship and relationships, because Scarlett doesn't trust people because she's been so hurt. And so she's close with her stepmom, who was this kind of wonderful person who saved her from the dad. But she doesn't really let people near her. And so it's like her letting Lukas in, but it's also her letting friendship in with Penelope, which is kind of sweet. But it's not like a cheating element at all, because the play or the device in the book is that Penelope is the one that broke up with Lukas because she wants something different. Like said no girl ever in a romance novel, I just want vanilla sex.
Yes, she's almost got like a matchmaker role
Yeah, yeah, she
But
totally
then
does.
throughout the book, Scarlett does feel guilty about, well, what if Penelope's having a hard time and Penelope ends up getting another boyfriend and then she gets dumped and really Scarlett is just afraid. She is skittish. She's just so full of anxiety and
Wonderful.
self-disappointment and self-deprecation, and she's kind of grasping for straws at other things to blame so she doesn't have to commit like emotionally to Lukas, and she latches on to Penelope and says, "Oh, well, she's my friend. She's been so nice to me. She's the closest friend I've ever had, and you're her ex-boyfriend, and she's going through this hard time." And there are multiple things that happen to Penelope that Scarlett basically feels personally responsible for soothing Penelope's life and making everything easy for her to the point that she won't even say out loud that Lukas and Scarlett are dating. Like she wants to keep that hidden because that would somehow hurt Penelope. Even though Penelope was the first one to ever bring it up, it's clearly a coping mechanism for her. And Lukas calls her out on it, but she's just it's not until the end of the book that she's ever able to just accept the fact that this is how she feels. She wants to be with him, he wants to be with her. Yeah, it's a scary thing, but just go for it. She's just always pushing him away. So they don't have like a traditional kind of third act breakup. It didn't feel like that to me. They do sort of have a breakup where she flies home because like this
She
whole
does the
event
runaway.
happens. She runs away from him, but she's been kind of running away from him all book. And he's been very clear that I'm here, I'm waiting for you. And so this is just an extension of that same kind of almost cat and mouse with their relationship where he is just being endlessly patient with her because he knows she needs time and that he's just trying to be there for her and give her what she needs.
Yeah, he's the best. He also is
best.
like the dream guy because I'm amazed at his dedication to her. And it towards the end of the book, I'm like, come on, would he really? So here's an example of how Ali Hazelwood made this very improbable thing of this like young 20-something male god of a person, have it be plausible that he would wait and be so committed to this other person. So he says to her, I saw you and you made sense to me. And the more I looked, the more I knew how hard you work, how it paid off until it didn't, how little you like chaos. You want to maintain control in every aspect of your life, and yet you are unraveling. And that was before I knew that you're kinky as shit. So he like sees this person who needs to be contained and who is like lives like him, like this kind of like not performative, very quiet life, but she can't do it anymore. And his kink is not just sexual, but it's also this caretaker of like, I want to tend to your unraveling edges. I want to be the one that holds you together. And then he finds out she's also in a power exchange in like the perfect way that he is. So there's that, but then you see these snippets of who he is in his own life. Like his brother enters the scene at one point visiting from Sweden and talks about how Lukas from forever likes to practice like this restraint in his life. And so he gets this amazing mattress when he's young boy, and it's so comfortable, and he sleeps on the floor for 3 months on the wood floor to like prove to himself that he doesn't have to have the mattress. So you're like, okay, you're a unique person. And then he has these two roommates, male roommates, who are on the swim team, and he's just like boss of the house, and they all listen to him. And it's not because he's a dick or he's like, he just is.
He just exudes control.
And people fall in line. And so one of the guys says, we've got a bit of a regime situation going on. And as he's kind of teasing Lukas, but also he does what Lukas says because Lukas wants the house spotless. And while they're kind of joking, she's sitting there in the kitchen. You see Lukas peeling this apple all in one peel.
Peel of the knife.
And he puts the roommate in place, says something like, we're adult men, and then he just quietly, no fanfare, sets this peeled apple slices down in front of Scarlett. And she goes, Hassan said, that's not very collegial of you, Lukas. And he just says, we are adult men, sliding the plate toward me. And she goes, did he make me a snack? And she's stoked. She like eats the snack, but it's so just exemplifies his personality. Like he's in charge without trying.
So when they first start to broach this subject of their sexual preferences and whether or not they are going to be a good match for each other, he pulls out this document that's, from what I can tell, just a list of every single kind of kink that might exist, and they both have to go through and say yes or no if they're interested. And he figures out very quickly that Scarlett wants to just look at his list and then tell him yes or no and copy what he said. And he's saying, why? Because you're afraid you'll say something that you like and then I don't like it, and then you'll be embarrassed. Like, just be honest. And so she's kind of been scolded a little. I had fun with this part of the book because there were a couple of words I didn't know what they meant. And I was like, ooh, I get to learn something new. There was the acronym DDLG. Do you know what that is?
I do, Holly.
I didn't. And I was trying to think of what it might mean. And
what did you think?
Everything I was coming up with had dick in it, but that was the wrong D.
What's one of them? I'm so curious.
Okay. Double dick, large girl. I didn't know. But it's daddy dom, little girl.
That is so awesome. Yeah, there is a whole subgenre for that.
I am uninitiated. Well, not anymore. I did read this.
No more. Now she knows. That's not double dick.
Okay.
It might be if daddy says.
And then I never heard of shrimping, which is sucking on toes.
I didn't know that either.
And then there was something called a Sibian, which, and I did look this one up in incognito, because I, knew that I was venturing into territory that I might not want to stay in. But there was this picture. It's like a saddle, but it's this electronic, like masturbation riding device.
Like a dildo on the saddle?
Yeah, I think that's what I was looking at. So that was one of the items, and I don't know if Scarlett said yes or no to that, but
we don't know.
Yeah, Lukas knows, because they did exchange lists. And as soon as she finally worked up the courage to fill out this list, and she gave it to Lukas, and I think they were in the library when this happened.
He loses his mind.
Yeah, she put the list down on the table. She hadn't even seen his yet, and he's like kind of furrowed brow, and he's reading it, and then he just threw it aside and just walked over to her, and grabs her, and it was like this triumphant kiss.
Yeah, he's like, oh my God, we're twins.
Yes, and as it turns out, their lists were basically identical. Well, or the inverse of each other. He wanted to do all these dominating things, and that's what she wanted him to do to her.
Yeah, peel me an apple, Lukas.
But I will say, of all the talk of, she described herself at the beginning of the book like, I'm a girl that likes to get tied up so I look like a mesh bag of limes, which made me laugh out loud. There's really none of that kind of stuff in the book. And you mentioned this earlier, they have the power exchange, and he certainly is very controlling and telling her exactly what to do. There's I think there was one spanking scene, but it wasn't very long. There wasn't much going on there. So it's not heavy on the physical punishment side of things. Not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's like a hint in the epilogue that maybe it would be because she's untethered, and he said, we can train that out of you with some punishment. And I was like, oh, book 2. Okay. Training Scarlett. I'm ready. But the control part is, it's not, it's such the way it was written was so great, because it is very much not like him managing her, but him being this container to her messy edges. And they really are the perfect fit. And the way that she wrote it was so good. And usually I prefer dual point of view, so I can kind of be in the other person's head. But as the narrator, Scarlett's experience of him providing her this kind of holistic experience is so fucking hot. You're like, oh God.
I think she wrote it so well. Scarlett is just talking about the way it's so freeing and everything feels so good when she finally has this person that understands her, and it's giving her an outlet for these feelings that she has, and that's taking all the pressure off of her. And it doesn't feel. And another thing she says right at the beginning when they first get together is, I don't know what kind of talk you're into, but no degradation, because that's the way that my dad abused me. And he's just like, oh no, Scarlett, I would never do that. So that's not something either of them are into. And it never shows up like that at all. His domination it's very loving and all encompassing of her. It's not about just denigrating her or anything like that.
No, it's a fabulous outfit with all the accessories. You're just covered in greatness, and you're like, oh, and I don't even have to do anything. And he also is highly attuned to her needs, which is delightful because as a reader, I want, like, that's the dream, right? The fantasy is like someone who's just like their whole being. He doesn't even want to swim anymore. His whole life is like, I just want to take care of Scarlett. I'm like, oh, nice. But she gets really overwhelmed by loud, big men. And so she's in the therapy room in the ice pool one of the days, and like all this pack of boy swimmers come in and they know her. She only knows one of them. They all know her because she's like, and she gets terrified. She has kind of like a PTSD response, even though they don't present a real danger. Her body does this, and she just kind of freezes up, and it's like, and she can't leave, and she's trying to act normal. And then out of nowhere, these hands come and just like pick her up under the armpits. It says like toddlers with water wings, and lift her out of the pool. So she's dangling in the air and like carries her out. He's like, I'm taking Scarlett. And the guys are like, what? And he like knew that he was passing by, and he rescued her, but not, so it's this way where he's like, she feels safe with him, and he is aware of how to make her feel safe.
And he even says, it's not me. You're always safe and relaxed around me. At one point he says to her, because she's always running from her feelings, saying, I know you like me. Like, I can tell. You're always relaxed around me. You're so fearful of other men, but you look at me a little longer when there's other people around. You walk closer
she like
to me.
looks to him for, and
That
she'll
is her
stand next
comfort.
to him.
Even before they are in a relationship together, she just gravitates towards him for comfort, and he notices that. He notices every little tiny tell that she has.
So
Lukas.
Great. Oh, Lukas.
Another thing that I didn't know about from this book, and this is a kink that he does have, is dacrophilia.
Oh, yeah.
So this might be a little much for some readers. She cries pretty much every time she has sex, and he really likes it. And he like licks her tears off of her face, and that is one of the things he likes.
Yeah, and
there was a lot of crying.
It isn't annoying. You know, it's not like, and I'm crying again, and now he's licking my face. Like each time it's a little different, and it is representative to me of her having all these pent up emotions that she can't express, and he's kind of like turning down, like letting them out, helping her.
Yeah, releasing the steam.
Yeah, totally. And so it's written a little bit different each time, but he does definitely love her crying, and I was reading it, I'm like, I don't know if I've had someone lick my tears off, and if it were to happen every time, how would I feel about that? I don't know. It's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
You're not Scarlett.
No, I'm not. Darn it. Okay, there was really good side characters, which they framed out the whole book, because it's all set in the pool, basically, or a bedroom is where the action takes place. But there's also action with the therapist and her stepmom.
Yeah, her stepmom, Barb, you mentioned her earlier. She didn't have a prominent role in the book, but I thought she was such a good tool that Ali Hazelwood used to help explain diving to the readers. So Barb has this charming personality quirk where she can never remember what Scarlett has told her about the way diving works. So then, of course, Scarlett has to re-explain, oh, I got this meet coming up, and this is the way the finals work, and this is the consequence if I come in second place, and blah, blah, blah. And Barb is just supportive as always. She's described as her mother. I mean, it's her stepmom, but in essence, it's her mother, who is super busy, is the reason that Penelope wants to become a doctor, because Barb is a doctor. And
she's the chief of like orthopedic surgeon at some major hospital.
Yeah,
so she's like
very successful. So she's this role model who provided her with structure and support, but at the same time was kind of absent for the day-to-day parts of her life. And that works out fine for Scarlett, because what she wanted was somebody to be there for her emotionally. She didn't really need someone cheering her on from the stands on every meet, which of course, now that we know that she never really notices anybody else around her anyway, that kind of makes sense. And another character that was also kind of small, but served a really important purpose was Jan, Lukas's brother that came and visited from Sweden that you talked about. He shows up, he's able to give us a little bit of a backstory to Lukas, even though Lukas doesn't have a point of view himself. But he does it in this like brotherly, like, I'm going to elbow you and give you a noogie kind of way. So it doesn't feel like info dumping. It's cute. You get this side of Lukas that you hadn't seen yet. And he also has this role of kind of pushing the two of them together a little bit. Is really pushing Scarlett when she's hesitant and she doesn't know. She never wants to assume that other people actually like her and are actually friends with her, and she's got such a low self-esteem. She's just always assuming, oh, I misread the situation and they don't actually think about me very much. And Jan's the one that's like, oh no, he very much likes you and he's always thinking about you. So he's kind of an instigator.
Yeah. The therapist, Sam, also was this device character to showcase how diving works, how Scarlett's brain works, and kind of also weave in the story of her dad and her trauma and how it informs her behavior. But it isn't until Scarlett's talking with Lukas, and I think the author does a great job of this because it's not right at the beginning, like this prologue scene where you see the dad like saying all this terrible stuff, but it's just this slow unveiling where we learn her kind of in the same way that she reveals to the rest of the people in her life. Like it's a very slow. But we find out that the day that this major accident that happened, this injury, where she flubbed this dive, landed all wrong, broke her body, her dad had contacted her and they had a restraining order. She hadn't heard from him in years. So he had contacted her that morning and said, I've been following you. I'm so proud of you. And she's like, oh my God, like trauma past. And that same day, her longtime boyfriend broke up with her in the morning and was like, I'm in love with somebody else. And right before this huge NCAA meet. And so, but she doesn't ever correlate those two things. She's just like, I failed at diving. And Lukas is like, you were totally freaked out from your dad. And then you had your heart broken. Of course this happened. And so then she's like, oh, and she brings it back to her therapist and like, they talk about it. But so she has such a disconnect from herself and that she might have emotions and that they might, and that other people, like she doesn't consider her ex a bad guy, even though, and so she was in the hospital forever. He never came to visit her. He didn't check on her.
Yeah, when Lukas hears this, he's like, what? He never came to check on you? And he's just appalled. And then she realizes, oh, yeah, maybe he is kind of an asshole.
Yeah, because the guy's like, I still want to be friends, but then he wasn't a friend. So she has all these kind of growing self-empowerment moments. Like she sees him later in the book and she's able to be like, because he's like, I miss you. And she's like, I don't care.
Yeah, she does stand up to him later in the book. Mm-hmm. Lukas does such a great job of helping her growth. It's her journey, it's her growth, but he is the driving force that she needs to kind of give herself the push.
Yeah, he's what we all need to make it through.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you brought up that she unveils all these bad things happen to her the morning of that NCAA tournament, because as the reader, we have no idea because she is the narrator and she is so just divorced from reality. All she thinks of is, I failed at this dive. That's the only clue we get as to what happened until finally Lukas is able to pull it out of her.
Yeah, like there's a reason that you malfunctioned on this thing that you're normally really good at. Your whole life kind of imploded.
Right. I love it when we have an unreliable narrator and
we're in their experience.
And then we get to realize the blind spots they have, and then we start to see them. I think that's very enjoyable.
Yeah. And so she has her whole swim team, which is fun, and they all add to the story, and we see swimming through them, and also kind of the driven personality of these like top tier student athletes who are competing. They're all at Stanford, but they're all competing in world championships, trying to qualify for the Olympics. So they are elite, like world-class level athletes, and the personality types, like they are focused.
They really are. We've talked about Penelope, her best friend, Lukas's ex-girlfriend, and also the captain of the diving team. Yeah, she seems perfect. What struck me about the relationship that Scarlett and Penelope had is, I mentioned before, Lukas and Scarlett didn't really go through a third act breakup, not in the way that I would traditionally think of in a romance novel, but Penelope and Scarlett kind of did. They had a
blowout.
And it was a breakup, and Penelope just was really mean and inappropriate and like unloaded on Scarlett and took out all of her just aggression and angst and stuff unfairly on to Scarlett. And then Scarlett fled So she fled both having to deal with her real emotions about Lukas, her boyfriend, but also having to come to terms with this, her like one close friendship that she finally fostered, that blowing up as well. And then, and this is right at the end of the book. And then after a month or something like that passed, Penelope just shows up. She's bought a ticket to St. Louis to visit Scarlett. She does the grovel. She does the grand gesture. She does all of these beats that we're used to seeing from the romantic lead.
Yeah, it's such a good point.
But it's just in repairing the friendship. And then once Scarlett goes through that, it kind of like triggers something in her head and she goes, oh, I need to be with Lukas. So then she flies to Sweden and almost does the same thing to Lukas.
Yeah. Well, she was going there before Penelope came, right? So I think she already had
she already decided?
I think so, which is the but that's a really good point, that it was like all the beats of a grovel, but it was a friend.
And it just, there's so much action happened right in the last 30 pages or so.
It was very tidy. It was a lot.
The epilogue in this book was a little bit weird. It was a series of 1 or 2 page vignettes kind of showing like a slice of life of them a few years later. It wasn't a 1 chapter story about where they're at, which I didn't particularly like it, although it did get a lot of information across, but I think I prefer a more traditional epilogue, but it was fine.
It was told from Lukas's point of view, and it was interesting because it was like a third person bird's eye view of Lukas's thoughts. So it wasn't as intimate feeling as the rest of the book.
Yeah, that's a good point.
More removed. And so it was a lot of information, and you see that he's bananas for her, but it doesn't have that warmth that her viewpoint had.
Yeah, that's probably why it just didn't hit for me.
Yeah, but it the friend blow up happens right when Scarlett gets everything that she's wanted. She wins the meet. She gets the dive. She wins on the dive that she had injured herself on. Like it's the classic, like you get it all moment.
All redemption.
All redemption. Lukas like was making out with her, and then it all falls apart. So that's kind of a fun little twist, but it is a quick tie-up of everything all at once. But I think that I have yet to see another book like this that's melds this theme of a very kind of power exchange sexual relationship that's super hot with the tone of this book, which was more, I mean, it's like a rom-com. It's funny, and the
tone was rom-com.
Yeah, it's very well written. But then this part is like something that you usually find more in like a dark romance, or even though the sex isn't dark per se, there's not like a danger element to it. So that was really fun because it was like, oh, full spice in rom-com.
Yeah, it was a really fun book to read.
It was super fun and super hot. Like often I feel like sex can be repetitive, and there's kind of like trends that happen in the words that people use, or the types of sex people have. And this is also totally fresh and like relatable, because I could read my emotions into Scarlett and understand why that sexual experience was so thrilling, not just for the hotness, but also for the context of like, oh my God, this relief from the chaos of my brain. So you guys got to read it if you haven't yet.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It is a good one. What are we reading next, Holly? We can't wait. I haven't read this author before, so it'll be a new one. And check out Ali Hazelwood's books, buy them, borrow them, share them. And thanks for joining us.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.